I want to lay down next to somebody that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. I really do.
Great is your mercy.
He was set to perform Saturday for the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, but a handful of gay rights activists objected.
Why is Donnie McClurkin's son finally speaking out at 65? What awful rumors has he been dealing with for years?
I've messed up more than I've had good. My past relationships were a sprinkling of everything, men and women.
After so much silence, why did he feel the need to confirm or deny these stories now? How has this affected his life and reputation? People have talked about him for a long time, so why is he choosing to address it all now?
And he was like, well, you know, McClurkin is kind of hard to pronounce. Maybe you need to think about changing your name to Donnie McClure. And McClure is easy, and people remember it.
The story starts as far back as May 29, 1933, when a 13-year-old girl named Olivia Jenkins gave birth to a baby girl named Frances. The heartbreaking part is that Frances's father was Olivia's stepfather, which is something that wasn't known to Frances at the time.
My daddy was born in South Carolina.
Oh, it's your dad.
I was born in New York, but same thing.
Okay.
You can't be born to a father from South Carolina.
Right.
As Frances grew up, she believed that her grandmother was her mother, and her mom, Olivia, was her sister. She didn't learn the truth until she was 16. Finding out the truth hurt her deeply and caused a lot of emotional pain. Later, she married Donald McClurkin, and they had a son, Donnie, on November 9, 1959. Donnie often spoke about how his mother's painful past affected her, and how she poured all her love and dreams into her children. She taught them how to sing, and Donnie believed he had the best voice out of his siblings. Even though his father was around, Donnie said his dad was emotionally distant. His dad didn't show love or praise, which left Donnie feeling unloved.
And my mother telling me that I killed her son.
His little brother, only 2 years old, followed him across the street and was hit by a speeding car. The little boy didn't survive. This tragic event tore the family apart. Donnie's mom, overwhelmed with grief, blamed him. She yelled, "You killed my son! Get him away from me!" These words stayed with Donnie for a long time and made the pain even worse.
My mother didn't want me. And I had to go hear her down the street. Get him away from me! Get him away from me! You killed my son!
After his brother died, things got harder for Donnie. His family was grieving, and his mom was angry at him. She blamed him for what happened. His dad started drinking more, and his mom began using drugs. It felt like everything was falling apart around Donnie. In 1969, Donnie went to a church service where the minister talked about Christ's love for everyone. This message made Donnie wonder if God could help him through his pain. He decided to give his life to Jesus. The church became a place where Donnie felt safe and at peace. He later said that the church was the only place where he felt like he truly belonged. This was a turning point in Donnie's life, helping him find hope and healing. On the day of his brother's funeral, 8-year-old Donnie was violated by his great-uncle. He told Ebony magazine, "An 8-year-old mind can't handle such levels of perversion." Experiencing this much pain, anger, confusion, and grief in such a short period of time was traumatic for Donnie. He told Praise 102.5, "Wherever you get broken, you're stuck there." According to AmenClinics.com, the emotional pain of childhood trauma lasts long after the incident has ended and can have a negative impact on mental health, brain health. Things didn't get easier for Donnie. When he was 13, something bad happened again. His great-uncle's son took advantage of him. This made Donnie question a lot of things. He wondered if he might be attracted to men, but he didn't want to accept that. He prayed and decided he wouldn't let that be part of who he was. Even though he was struggling, Donnie kept to himself. He didn't want to deal with his family's problems. Instead, he spent all his time at church and focused on his music. It was his way of escaping and finding comfort in a world that felt so hard. At some point, his parents went through a divorce, but despite the tough times, he found a way to use his talent in music. By this time, he had already mastered the piano and created musical groups. One of these groups was the McClurkin Singers. He also formed the New York Restoration Choir, which released an album in 1975 called I See a World.
Because my faith tells me that I'm supposed to be responsible for this temple.
Right.
this is the temple of the Lord. I've got to maintain this thing because in me dwells God. You know.
However, behind his fame and achievements, Donnie was facing some very personal struggles. One of the biggest battles he fought was trying to understand his own sexuality. In the early 80s, Donnie's life took a big turn. He met Pastor Marvin Winans while working with a church choir. Pastor Winans invited Donnie to Detroit to help start a new church ministry. 6 years later, in 1989, Donnie moved to Detroit and became an associate minister at Perfecting Church. Around this time, he also started traveling and singing at churches across the country. In 1996, Donnie's music career really began to take off when he released his first studio album, Donnie McClurkin. The album went gold, meaning it sold a lot of copies. Then in 2000, Donnie's song We Fall Down became a big hit. It played all the time on gospel radio, which made him even more popular both for his music and his preaching.
We fall down sometimes, but we get back up again.
But while all of this was happening, Donnie was struggling privately. He was trying to understand his feelings about his sexuality. In a speech, he admitted that as a child, he misunderstood some things that had happened to him. He thought they might be connected to his sexual orientation. Later, Donnie wrote in his book that he felt broken and realized that homosexuality was not part of God's plan for him. In 2000, Donnie became a father. He had a son named Matthew with a woman named Kim, though they were not married. Becoming a father was an important moment in Donnie's life. He felt like having a child helped him find a sense of manhood that he had been missing. A few years later, Donnie also adopted a 9-year-old girl named Michelle. While this might have seemed like a loving decision, some people, including myself, felt unsure about a single man adopting a young girl without being married. Looking back, Donnie admitted that it may not have been the best idea to bring 2 children into his life while dealing with so many personal struggles. He spoke about how his past affected his relationship with his son. He said that for several years, his relationship with Matthew was broken. Even though Donnie made sure to provide for him financially, he realized he hadn't given Matthew the emotional support that he needed. Donnie also shared that every morning he prayed to God, asking for help with being a good father. He said, "I got up in the morning and prayed a simple prayer. I looked up to God and said, 'God, I'm afraid, so help me to be a good father.'"
Tell me, what do you do?
Despite his personal struggles, Donnie became a pastor. In 2001, his mentor Marvin sent him to Freeport, New York, to help establish Perfecting Faith Church. He is still the senior pastor of the church today. But even with this new role, he didn't have everything figured out. Donnie admitted that he had struggled with homosexuality for 20 years. Although he believed he had overcome it, he still faced temptations. He explained to Cross Rhythms, "Just because God delivers you doesn't mean that the temptations don't come back." He learned that even though he was trying to move forward, the past could still catch up with him. The more Donnie preached about overcoming his past, the more some people tested him. But instead of giving in, Donnie realized that having supportive people around him kept him on track. He learned that being accountable to others helped him stay strong. He said, "When you are weak, count on me." This shows that even though he was preaching about overcoming his struggles, he knew he still needed help.
People told me what I could not do. They didn't tell me who I was. They never told me what I could accomplish, who I could be. They put the shackles on and the limit.
In 2001, Donnie wrote a memoir and released a documentary where he talked about his childhood and his struggles with his sexuality. He admitted that looking back on his painful past helped him find closure. He also criticized church leaders who were harsh toward LGBTQ people. Donnie felt that preachers often used hurtful language and failed to show love. He said, "We haven't portrayed the love of Jesus Christ." McClurkin.
I've messed up more than I've had good. My past relationships were a sprinkling of everything, men and women.
In 2021, he made a surprising confession during an interview on the TV show Uncensored. Donnie shared that although he had feelings for men, he was choosing not to act on them. He also revealed that he never had a long-term relationship and had flings with both men and women. This confession got a lot of people talking. Donnie's comments raised some interesting questions. especially from people like Auntie Regina. She asked, "What happened to the days when people waited until marriage to have sex?" In the past, relationships were more serious, and it was expected that people would wait until marriage. But in Donnie's case, he didn't mention anything about waiting for marriage, which seemed different from how things were once done. Donnie tried to explain his feelings for men by comparing it to craving sugar. He said, "I don't eat sugar, but that doesn't mean I don't want." Some people thought this explanation was strange, and it left them confused. It seemed like Donnie was trying too hard to explain something that didn't need to be explained, and not everyone agreed with his choice of words. Another part of Donnie's story that caught attention was when he said he never had a long-term partner or got married. He even said he might end up alone forever. Some fans felt sad for him, thinking it was unfair that he had to suffer from loneliness just because of his sexual attraction. They felt sorry for him, believing that he might have to isolate himself to fit into what his church teaches about relationships. These fans just wanted him to find happiness, no matter who he loved.
I want to lay down next to somebody that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. I really do.
Talking about being in a relationship, in August 2016, on the Praise the Lord talk show, the host, Matt Crouch, made a big announcement. He said that Donnie was engaged to Nicole C. Mullen, who is also a gospel singer. The moment was pretty surprising, and it seemed like the couple was ready to start a new chapter. Donnie, who was a guest on the show that night, didn't deny it. Instead, he said that the only thing missing in his life was marriage. He said he was doing well financially and spiritually, and emotionally, he was working on it. But he felt that marriage was the missing piece to complete his life and make his family whole. But wait a minute, he seemed to forget about his kids. How can you talk about building a family and not mention your children?
Having a long-term relationship in my life and never being married.
Nicole didn't let things sit quietly. She hopped on Twitter to clear up the confusion. She explained that they were just dating and still working toward getting married. She said Donnie hadn't met her father yet, and there were a few things they needed to work through before taking the next step. She also said there was a good chance they'd get married, but they were taking their time.
I didn't know how to have the relationship. I didn't know really what a woman wanted.
Donnie later posted a video on social media saying that he and Nicole needed more counseling before getting married. Maybe it was just an excuse, or maybe they were just trying to be careful. But whatever was going on, things didn't work out between them. In December 2020, Nicole moved on and married someone else. She found a new man, tall, dark, and handsome. Donnie wasn't her man, but she moved on and found happiness. And you can't blame her for that.
I'm gonna probably be alone for the rest of my life as far as a mate is concerned.
A surprising story started spreading about Donnie. A man came forward and shared details with a blogger named Clay Kane. According to the man, he met Donnie backstage at a gospel event. They talked, exchanged phone numbers, and soon began calling and emailing each other. The man claimed Donnie told him he often felt very lonely while traveling for his music. He said Donnie admitted to crying in hotel rooms because of how isolated he felt. Over time, their conversations reportedly became more personal. The man said their relationship became intimate a few months later. However, he described these moments as awkward, saying Donnie had specific preferences that made him uncomfortable. Despite this, the two stayed in touch on and off for a few years, from 2001 to 2004. Eventually, they lost contact. While rumors about his personal life were circulating, Donnie stayed focused on his faith and beliefs. In 2009, he spoke openly at a church event about his struggles. He said, "Were it not for this Jesus, I would be a homosexual today." That same year, Donnie got involved in a major controversy. Another gospel singer, Tonex, came out as gay, and Donnie criticized him harshly. He called homosexuality a perversion and said both society and the church had failed Tonex. His words upset many people but also gained support from others, showing how divided opinions are in the Black church community. In a sermon, Donnie went even further, calling homosexuals vampires. In 2011, he made more controversial statements, blaming fatherless homes for affecting young people's sexuality. Many people in the church cheered and even cried during his speech, which shows how emotional this topic is for some.
I really do. I miss the fact that I did not have the family unit that I could lay next to my spouse with my baby on my chest and be the quintessential dad.
However, 2013 was a difficult year for Donnie. He lost both of his parents, which was a major personal loss for him. On top of that, because of his harsh comments about gay people, he was uninvited to perform at that year's March on Washington memorial concert. His reputation continued to be affected by his strong anti-gay views. Then in 2015, when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of marriage equality, Donnie made it clear he was not happy with the decision. He expressed his disgust and told his church to stand firm against what he saw as sin. Donnie became one of the most outspoken critics of the ruling, urging his followers not to accept what he called sin. "I simply said I don't agree with the verdict of the Supreme Court. I don't have to be perfect to speak what the Bible says or what I know to be true," McClurkin responded to his critic. "I don't know where you'll be if you die tomorrow, and that wasn't a point in my blog. I just don't agree with the verdict and believe the Bible. That's all," he said. Isn't it ironic? Donnie also had his invitation to perform at a civil rights rally taken away. Why? Because he is a former homosexual. It's strange when you think about it, how a man who once lived as gay and now identifies as straight is being punished for simply being honest about his past. Some might wonder if they're worried that more people might leave the gay lifestyle if they hear Donnie's story. Would they be afraid that just by being around him, they might change? Is that the fear? That his story could inspire others to leave their same-sex attraction behind? Back in 2007, when Barack Obama was running for president, he asked gospel Donnie McClurkin to perform at one of his campaign events in Charleston, South Carolina. The goal was to get more support from religious people in the South. But things didn't go as planned. At the event, McClurkin said something that upset many people. He told the crowd, "They accuse me of being anti-gay and a bigot. We don't believe in discrimination. But there is a side of Jesus Christ that deals with judgment, and all sin is against God." He then went on to say, "I tell you that God delivered me from homosexuality." This statement made it clear that McClurkin believed homosexuality was a choice, not something people are born with.
Gospel singer Donnie McClurkin was banned from performing at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial because of his stance on homosexuality. McClurkin has testified God delivered him from being gay.
This caused a lot of anger, especially from LGBT groups and supporters. Obama didn't stay quiet about it. His team quickly made it clear that Obama disagreed strongly with McClurkin's views. They said that Obama believed everyone should be treated equally, no matter their sexual orientation. Because of this, Obama decided not to let McClurkin perform at any more campaign events. The situation was a big issue for Obama, who was trying to appeal to both religious voters and those who supported equal rights for the LGBT community. It was clear that McClurkin's words didn't fit with Obama's message of inclusion and equality. So the singer's performance at future rallies was canceled.
He was set to perform Saturday for the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, but a handful of gay rights activists objected.
Looking back, it's clear that Donnie's views have caused a lot of confusion. At one point, he criticized church leaders who spoke out against gay people, but later he became one of the strongest voices against them. This shift left many people puzzled. Donnie was once connected to a group called Exodus International. This group believed that they could change gay people into being straight. They tried to do this through prayer and something called conversion therapy. Many people now agree this idea was harmful and didn't work. Donnie even wrote on Exodus International's website about his own experience. He shared how he felt saved and thought he had become the person he was meant to be. For a while, he supported the group's work, but in 2018, things got messy. A person on Twitter claimed that they had been sent to Exodus in the 1990s by Donnie's mom. They said their time there was awful. They accused Exodus leaders of taking advantage of them. When they told their parents about it, Exodus turned against them, and their parents kicked them out. This was a very sad and shocking story, showing how much harm the group had caused. Exodus International shut down in 2013 after 37 years. Before closing, they apologized to the gay community. They admitted they had been wrong and said they were sorry for the pain they caused. They also apologized for the way some Christian groups judge gay people. Many people thought this was a big and important moment. Then in December 2018, Donnie had a scary accident. He was driving on the highway when he suddenly passed out. His car crashed and he ended up in the hospital. Donnie had a sprained wrist, a hurt knee, and needed stitches on his thumb. It could have been worse, but luckily, he was okay. If I had been his nurse, I might have teased him and said, "You're fine, go home," because his injuries didn't seem too bad. But all jokes aside, it was still a scary experience for him. Donnie's life is proof that even the hardest battles can turn into something meaningful. He's been super real about his struggles, from dealing with childhood trauma to wrestling with questions about his identity. And that raw honesty, it's inspired so many people who face their own challenges. The experiences of his childhood shook him, like it would anyone, but they also pushed him toward the church, where he found a little bit of comfort in the chaos. Openly talking about how he wrestled with his feelings and how they clashed with his faith must have taken an enormous amount of courage, something that might inspire others to face their demons head-on. It's been a tough road, trying to navigate who he is while staying true to what he believes in. But through all that struggle, he stayed committed to sharing his story, using his journey to let others know they're not alone. What sets Donnie apart is, instead of hiding his pain, he's used it to create music and ministry that's all about healing and hope. His story reminds us that even the darkest parts of life can lead to light if you keep pushing forward. It's clear that Donnie has faced a lot of struggles. He's tried to figure out how to balance his faith, his sexuality, and his place in the world. Everyone has their own opinion about how he's handled his story, but what's obvious is that he's doing his best to figure things out, just like anyone else would.